Hello and welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. Speaking of delusions, in this segment, James and I talk about debt. Is it ever worth going into debt to operate your creative work? We discuss whether debt might be called overhead, how we discern between a good debt and a pointless waste of money, and other important aspects of this topic that every single creative person in the world has to encounter at some point or another. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, Pat.
Yes, James.
Well, I'm down here in the Gifted Underachievers Savings and Loan, a wing of Gifted Underachievers Enterprises and Financial Services Limited.
Right.
And it kind of got me to thinking as creatives, whether this is, creative adjacent work like the editing, the ghostwriting, or the core creative work, the, writing of novels and short stories and that kind of thing. This sort of top level question came to mind. What is worth going into debt for? Where is the, do you think of it in terms of a strict financial ROI experience? Is anything worth going into debt for? Or should debt be, avoided like the plague? Yeah, it's got me kind of thinking.
That's
What are your
cool.
thoughts? Where are you on this?
Well, I'm actually curious about
As the savings and loan supervisor.
supervisor. Well, let me just get my managerial ruler and I forget what else.
Yeah, you got to get the proper toque on.
Yeah, let me get my toque. The toque with the big money symbol on it. What's worth going into debt for as a creator? Well, thanks for letting me go first because I do have some thoughts, but I'm curious about yours as well.
Uh-huh.
I think that many creative people will go into debt on training, learning their craft. So I went and did an MFA. I didn't have 40 grand sitting in the bank waiting to be spent. In an American university? No, I did not. So I went into debt.
Yep.
And luckily I had home equity, so I could borrow money off the value of my house to do this. I did it in my 40s. Do I regret it? No, absolutely not. It gave me an entire new career.
Yeah.
Did I know it was going to do that when I went into it? No, I didn't know editing existed as a job. I mean, I was aware that there was people working on books and publishing, but I did not know that what I do for a living was something that people could do. I just wasn't educated, and they didn't talk about it either during the program. So,
That's really funny that you mentioned that because my introduction to ghostwriting was reading Bloom County cartoons.
no way.
And they would periodically have the ghostwriter character come in and write an entire book in 40 minutes or something like that.
Hilarious.
Right. And that was it. That was my complete exposure to what ghostwriting is. And it wasn't until I started doing it. And I didn't even know I was doing it.
What?
My first time as a ghostwriter, I didn't even realize I was being a ghostwriter. Only because I was brought in by MIT Press to collaborate. And so the word wasn't even used. And it took me a little while to kind of go, so that's what this is.
Really?
So, yeah. So that's how smart I was.
Oh, you know what? So the reason I spent that money was because I was tired of writing bad novels. I was on my fifth novel and they were all bad, and I knew it because I'm a reader. And sure, maybe one or two of them could have gotten read by I never even submitted them. I think I submitted the very first one. And I think I told you this story. They sent me back an editorial letter, but I didn't know that's what it was. I thought they didn't like my book, so I just went away and wrote a different one.
So it was an acceptance that didn't say you are accepted in big bold letters kind of thing.
I think it was a revise and resubmit, but they didn't even say that.
Yeah?
They just said, here's what I thought. And then there was 30 bullet points and on 3 pages. And that's all. I got it by fax. This tells you how long ago that was. So anyway, I had no, they didn't say at the bottom, hey, if you make these changes, I'll read it again. Nothing like that. I was just
Wow.
kind of left to figure it out. And I didn't figure it out because I didn't know
Mhm.
anybody else who was a writer. So anyway, so I did go into debt to learn how to write better. And I did it not because I thought there would be a return on investment financially, but because I thought I couldn't survive trying to write another bad book. And
Mhm.
writing is my operating system. So I knew I would keep writing bad books, and I just thought mentally and emotionally I could not survive not knowing how to do
Mhm.
this and just cobbling together craft books and night school courses and one shitty workshop after another that didn't
Mhm.
get me the big picture overview that I need. I needed to study it basically, and I think a lot of visual artists, actors, they will. I read this story about Matt Damon. When he was already had some traction as an actor, and he was auditioning for a particular role that required a certain accent, like a seaboard accent. It was still an American accent, but it
Mhm.
wasn't the one. He's Boston, I think, or wherever I don't know where he's from. But
Mhm. Awesome.
so he tells a story. He laid out for a dialogue coach when he did not have the money,
Yeah.
and dialogue coaches aren't cheap. And he went in and nailed the audition, but he didn't get the role. Somebody else, I think it was
Huh.
Ethan Hawke, got the role. Um, I'm just spitballing in that. And so that's an example of just somebody talking in an interview. And I'm not, I don't really watch actor interviews, but I came across it.
Mhm.
So do I think it's worth going into debt? What do I think is worth going into debt for? I would say your craft. If you are really, whether or not you think you're going to get the role or sell the book, if you need to do something to learn your
Mhm.
craft and you want to spend that money, whether you have it or not,
Mhm.
and you can figure out how to get it if you don't have it, then
Mhm.
absolutely it's worth it. It's worth it for your life as a human being. You've got to show up for yourself.
Mhm. Yeah.
If you were to say, "Oh, well, shit, I'm up for this audition and I know I need work, but you know what? I'm short on the rent this month. I'm not gonna do it." And that's fine if you really are completely
Mhm.
tapped out and you have nobody to get that money from. But if you
Mhm.
can find it and you want to do it, even if it doesn't work out, it's worth it because you invest it. You bet on yourself.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, yeah. So I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No,
Yeah.
no, go ahead. We can spitball it back and forth.
Okay.
So what do you think?
Yeah. So for me, I can't think of a specific moment where I went into debt for creative work, other than, I would include my, getting a college degree and a college loan,
Yeah, yeah.
which in the US has proved to be rather problematic, unfortunately, because the interest I am paying is crazy. But
Mm,
so there's that. But I think it's more, I think of it from the perspective of right now, what would I go into debt for?
okay.
Feel like the return is enough. And it's interesting that we both talked about, you didn't realize that there is this whole freelance editing world out there. And I didn't realize really what specifically ghostwriting was. I saw it more as like being a hired gun kind of thing,
Mm,
as opposed to what it truly is, which is this very, turned out to be this very collaborative process that we call ghostwriting, which I think probably isn't the best name for it. So,
right.
one would be if there's a real substantive way that you're going to get past certain, what I'll call for now, a naivete,
Mm,
so that you can be a savvier operator.
right.
Uh, those kinds of things where you really can link it firmly to advancing your career.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I lean, as I said, more to the, avoid debt like the plague,
Yeah.
but not in every single circuit. There are definite exceptions. And so that's one of them. And as part of that, so I've told you, but I haven't mentioned it, in the podcast, that I've, sent out an application to go to Breadloaf
Oh,
Writers,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I periodically do this. It's like a flight of fancy, right? And then don't get in and sort of feel. And the one of the problems with Breadloaf is to get to my dad, I have to drive by Bread Loaf
Ugh,
every single time.
damn.
The literal where they meet. And it's a
Shit.
beautiful, beautiful set of buildings high up in the Green Mountains outside of
Ugh.
Middlebury, Vermont, near the edge of Lake. I mean, it's like, come on, people.
Yeah.
So I drive by it. And when my kids were little, I got rejected. And I taught them that every time we drove by there, we give them the finger. Right. So there'd be my little guys in the back seat going, let my dad in, fuck you.
That's
So
funny.
there's that part of it. But if I were to get in, I think when you figure in, they charge like a tuition fee and then there's a room and board fee. And I think it's as high as like $4,000 total.
It's not cheap unless you get a bursary or some kind of
Yeah.
fellowship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this gets scholarships, and so obviously if I get in, I would want to, hopefully do something like that. But nonetheless, if I were to get in, yes, I would go to, there's some pretty okay lenders where you can get these spot loan type things.
Right.
The
Okay.
interest isn't out of, completely out of whack. I would hate to go, I would grit my teeth, but I feel like that experience, the return on it would absolutely be worth, going into that bit of debt
Right.
so that's one. I actually, what, I do go into debt for certain things. So buying a new computer,
Yeah.
right? Usually I don't go on every 3 years I've got to get a new computer. I kind of go by is it starting to show signs of age and is it
Hmm.
time to do a new
Yeah.
thing? And because I don't often, I need a certain amount of memory and capacity, so getting a cheapy computer doesn't work.
Right.
And I don't often have like $1,500 that I can just throw at a computer, you
Right.
know. So to me, like I have a Best Buy credit card where if I pay it off within a certain amount of time, don't get charged interest.
Hmm.
So that's those kinds of things I will kind of go into debt for.
Yeah.
And then I think about, there's a lot of subscriptions that I
Yeah.
get that are all part of work. And in a sense, that's going into debt because you get that monthly, either you pay them yearly or monthly. And that, those automatic withdrawals out of my account are like, I see them each month and like, ugh, but at the same time, it's the necessity of being in business. And
Yeah.
that is also a
Interesting.
kind of debt too,
Huh.
that I need to do.
Right.
The other piece of this too is all the things that I'm talking about are also tax deductions.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a compensatory aspect of those. There's nothing ever, I would never go into debt to travel,
Right.
right?
Right. Well, except your
Um,
bread loaf.
except the bread. Well, but that's, for a thing. I mean, like I
Right.
wouldn't go into debt because, I want to just go off somewhere or something,
For a
like, oh, the
vacation.
experience will be good for me for this, I feel like that's hard for me to quantify in a way that justifies, especially if when I think about going to debt, I think you're going to pay, and then there's the interest on top of that. Um, but again, there's lots of exceptions to that too. So I can think of exceptions, for those kinds of things. But
Yeah.
so the point being is I avoid it as much as I possibly can. But there are very specific things for which I'm willing to do that for.
Okay. I think we have a completely different mental model of,
Yeah.
yeah, because I know it costs me $1,000 a month to run my business without paying
Mhm.
myself. Yeah, my
Mhm.
overhead is a grand a month. Subscriptions, website hosting, all of the recurring costs,
Mhm.
including like I gather that because when I file my taxes, I filed as a small business um and so I have I pay an accountant and I pay various people. all of that over the year, and it's been pretty constant over the last several years. It was actually more when I rented an office. It
Mhm.
was more like 1,500 a month. That's just to run my business, and I don't consider paying those bills going into debt. So my subscriptions, I don't think of it as a debt item. I think of it as
Mm,
my overhead. It's part of my overhead. And
mhm,
then whatever's left over. So if I'm spending 1,000 a month running my business, I only have to make 12 grand a year. Um, Everything else I split up into my monthly draw,
mhm,
which is several thousand, and has been static for years because I don't feel comfortable making it any higher than it already is. It's not very high.
mhm,
And the other stuff is my cushion, my buffer
mhm,
account, for which, like, the 1,000 a month includes if I need a new computer. That comes out every 5 years or something, but
mhm,
I add up, like, I have stats basically every year, and so it averages out to 1,000 a month.
mhm.
Um, so it's interesting to me, even conference fees, they're all in there. It's 1,000 a month, 12,000 a year
Wow.
for everything I do. So it's all of those costs are contained within the umbrella of my business. They're not coming out of
Mhm.
my personal money. So you have a different model where you just throw everything you earn into your family income, and then
Yeah.
it feels like you're borrowing money back to run your business. I would say that's more a question of optics than anything else.
Well, I think it's about, so the subscription stuff, it's more, there's always opportunities for new subscriptions to things that, can serve the business, right?
Mhm.
And so it's more about how I look at that, even if it's like $10 a month, I really, really analyze, is this worth it? Right? Is this something that I need? And so part of it is not just the ongoing stuff, because there's obvious subscriptions like, Microsoft Office, right?
Yeah,
I need that to be able to do my work.
yeah,
But there's less obvious ones, like, Publishers Marketplace,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I could live without it, but it provides a very solid service that I absolutely need. The newest one where I've been, really evaluating is AI.
Mhm.
And so I
Me too.
found one that I was like, this fits because this really, really fits what I want AI to do for me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it was like I went through a real analysis of thinking about, is it worth the money that I'm going to spend? And it's in a sense to me like going into, I guess it's not strictly going into debt or literally going into debt, but it's going to reduce, it's a payment. And so, yeah, so I really think about it that way. Yeah.
Yes, I didn't mean to imply that I don't think about the money I
No, no,
spend.
no. Yeah, no,
So
I'm sure.
just so you
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
there's subscriptions I cancel because I don't want to spend that overhead. I canceled Teachable
Mhm.
because I wasn't running those courses. I do subscribe to the free Publishers Marketplace, but no, Publishers Lunch or whatever, but I only get Publishers Marketplace if I'm doing a specific um sort of phase of a project and I need it just for that, and then I cancel because there's no barrier to canceling. You can do month by month.
Mhm.
So I'm very discerning about what I
Yeah.
spend. So there's two different things.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
No,
we're
I
we're just
would never
talking about it
agree.
how we view where the pots of money are coming from. That's what I meant. We're quite different there. I think we're
Yeah.
basically the same in understanding that we have to control overhead. Otherwise, it goes out
Yeah.
of it goes out of control. And I also don't have time to read all the shit I could subscribe to.
Yeah.
So okay, so worth going into debt for anything that helps us run our business. What do you think about, is it worth going into debt for training? You said you do bread loaf, but other stuff?
Yeah. Again, it's an analysis process. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, yeah, I like when I would think about training, it's not just the skill or skills, or insights that I would get, but am I also adding to my network
Yeah,
of
exactly. Same
my
here.
human
Yeah.
network? Yeah.
Yeah,
And that, bread loaf would fit into that,
for
right?
sure.
Because
Yeah.
obviously I think it would really help me improve as a writer, but it would also, be a very important, network building
Yeah. I would
experience.
say So, what do you call those? Red Loaf, Tin House, they don't have it anymore, but those are like week-long writing intensives, writing
Yeah,
community.
writing
What do you call those?
conference,
Yeah, so
writers, you know.
I include conferences too for say I belong to the Historical Novel Society, or I did. I don't anymore because I dropped it because I
Mhm,
wasn't working on that much historical fiction for a period, and so it wasn't worth it. And I wasn't going to travel because it was COVID, so that wasn't worth it
mhm,
either. But I consider conferences worth it. So I guess what we've arrived at so far is that we both think it's worth going in. I don't consider it going into debt. I consider it overhead, but we both think it's worth going into debt as a creator for certain
mhm,
things. And those are related to either running the business, like needing a new computer,
mhm,
to increasing our network or our craft knowledge, like Red Loaf, and
mhm.
for me, my MFA, and not worth certain other things, like I think that falls under the umbrella of, as far as a piece of overhead goes or a project goes, you would still apply the same amount of decision making to it as you would for a- any personal purchase, which is, do
Yeah.
I need this? What's it going to do for me? Can I afford it? How am I going to pay for it? All of that
Mhm.
goes into the same thinking around the overhead expenditures. I don't know that you can avoid debt slash overhead um, as a creative. What do you think?
No, well, and we've talked about like you have these friends who live kind of in the middle of nowhere and,
Yeah.
try to live as much for free as they possibly can.
Well, they really control their they own the land, but they have no. I don't think they have running water. They have high speed internet because they both use it
Mhm.
for work. But yeah.
Yeah, so they're going on a very, very stripped down kind of
Hmm.
model, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that, you hear a lot of stories, especially about people who are starting out when they're young, where they have a life partner or something like that, and they say we're going to live in this cheap, dingy little
Yeah.
tiny little apartment, pay no rent, we're going to not really have jobs, we're going to go out once a year, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's fine for some people or fine for a limited amount of time, but you know for those of us who wanted to and were very pleased to have kids and all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff, you know all of a sudden your needs and those kinds of things go up. So yeah, you've really got to think about your overhead, you've really got to think about your debt and how does it all fit together. And I think too, we're getting to we have real different business models in terms of how we structure the finances.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons why I do what I do. Some
Hmm.
tax, some just personal. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, that's something that people, if you're starting out, you need to think about what is my structure? Am I
Mhm.
a business and am I going to make income from the business, or am I a freelancer contract and, my income is my income kind of thing?
Yeah.
And what's going to work for you? And then I think it's worth periodically revisiting that too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I would say, yeah.
Yeah. One of my things about debt is I've been burned by debt.
Yeah.
And not because I went out and bought a bunch of guitars, but I have cancer diagnoses and
Hmm.
those kinds, single parenting for a long time and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so just to survive, I had to go into debt. And
Yeah.
and you learn very quickly that when there's an extreme need, it's great to be able to do that,
Mhm.
right? To fix the car or to, pay the doctor, whatever it is. But, um, the hangover can really,
Yeah.
last a long time and really get in the way of being able to do
Yeah.
other things too.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it gets really, really hard, I think,
I think
um,
so.
you know, to
I
really
mean,
make the,
that speaks to location as well, because I think 60% of our listeners are American or in the US,
Mhm.
but the rest are not. We have
Mhm.
75 countries. And I'm in a country where it's almost impossible to go into medical debt
Mhm.
because we have a system.
Yeah,
So
you probably have to come to the US to get
yeah,
get
and
care in the
people do.
US.
People absolutely do. Like, it's
Yeah.
not that we have every level of healthcare 100% nailed. We're just not a big enough population to have the top of every field operating in Canada,
Yeah.
and our system doesn't attract every type of medical expert. But I think the idea that, if I collapse in the mall and somebody calls an ambulance, I'm not going to owe 2 grand when I get to the
Mhm.
hospital. I'm only going to owe $80. That makes life easier. I think that I have a much easier time thinking about debt because I don't have these giant, honestly, like the they're not overhead, they're the cost of living.
Mhm.
Medical treatment is necessary to be alive, getting your kids lunches, is
Yeah.
necessary, right?
Yeah.
Fixing the car if you live in a rural area is necessary. So, I think just depending on where you are, some of the types of debt, that, somebody in one country can get into are just not even,
Yeah.
conceivable in another
Well,
place.
and I would say, so there's the medical debt side of it, which, I think again depends kind of where you are in the US and who you're getting services from. But
Right.
one is you don't get charged interest for that. And I've
True.
found that it's been very easy to set up reasonable, affordable payment plans, right?
Yeah.
So where I got into trouble was being responsible for as a parent of 2 kids
Yeah.
and not being able to work because I was going through treatment.
Yeah.
And so there's nobody, even if you get in the US, um, disability, that's only at most 60% of what you were making.
Right.
And a lot of times it's less. And
Yeah.
so you have to make up that loss of income
Yeah.
somehow. And
Yeah.
so, it's going into debt to pay, for heat, electricity, groceries and those kinds of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it works in other countries. If you get sick, is there a financial resource that comes in and fills the void? But
Yeah, me neither.
that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, it's tough and why you don't want to have these things happen to you.
Yeah.
But it has made me very uh I'm not sure what but very cautious about, debt,
Absolutely.
which I
Yeah.
think everybody is. I don't mean to say that you're not or other people aren't.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's made me actually, what it has made me is I am very happy to go into debt for something that I feel is absolutely worth it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if I get into bread loaf, I will be more than happy I will be excited to be
Yeah.
able to and see that as as a resource and a good
Yeah.
resource.
Yeah.
And the same, if my computer starts to crap out, off I don't have to sweat it. I can go to Best Buy with my little card that they have and get the computer that I need.
Yeah. It's how you make a
So
living. So these are your
yeah,
tools of the trade, basically.
yeah, yeah. So I see, it's a resource, but it's something that you have to be, really careful about.
I think so too. I mean, I'm just thinking about, say, if you run a plumbing company, say you're let's call it a freelance plumber, even though nobody ever says
Mhm.
that. Um, do you shell out for a van? Do you buy a used van?
Right.
All your tools, all of that stuff. How much capital are you prepared to outlay, without knowing what your monthly income is going to be at the first? Maybe you go work for a plumbing company where they supply company vans, and then the owner of that company, maybe they have 35 plumbers under them and 15 vans or whatever, and they figure out how to carry all those costs. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm just thinking about how in any small business there is this tension between being able to have the tools you need and pay for the training you need, while at the same
Mhm.
time being aware of how much return on investment you may get
Mhm.
from that stuff, which is,
Yeah.
I think, why
Well, and
people do live really lean or work really lean. I work very lean. I don't buy a new
yeah,
computer, very often.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, my computer has been good. I think I bought it in 2019, and I'm
Yeah.
very, very
Yeah.
happy with it. And if anybody wants to know what it is, I'm more than willing to tell you, but I'm not going to market them right now.
No.
Um, and the other thing I think about too is so farmers in the US, Trump has really screwed them over a few times
Mm,
because a lot of them go into debt in anticipation of harvest,
course.
right?
Yeah.
And so Trump with the tariffs, the soybean farmers got completely screwed
Oh,
because
yeah.
they go into debt anticipating market conditions
Yeah.
for soybeans, and then all of a
Stable.
sudden your biggest buyer says screw you, we're not going to pay tariffs, right?
Yeah.
And so the point there is not so much Trump's an asshole, he is, but that we also have to be very careful that externalities
Yeah.
can impact our ability to pay back that debt,
For
which
sure.
can cause further problems too. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking
yeah.
about AI. I don't think it's going to affect, I don't know. It'll affect some of the levels of editing I provide, but not all of them. And I because I
Mhm.
have these other income streams, I think I can probably survive. But if I were a new editor and I was doing only copy editing, I would for sure
Yeah.
be be starting to hedge my bets about what either adding things that make me unique that AI can't do in my job, and just leaves aside the intellectual property concerns. So take away
Mhm.
the ethics and the morality, take away the environmental cost, but just on a strictly
Yeah.
am I going to disappear from the ecosystem level in the next 5 years? We got to think about that if we're going into debt. Do I need
Yeah.
to take this course in an aspect of copy editing, or do I need to go up the food chain and take a course in some
Right.
aspect of editing that that machines can't do?
Yeah. Or do I need to be part of some paid seminar where somebody's going to explain here's what to expect in the next 5 years for
Yeah,
editors?
yeah.
My son is right now, he has a degree in computer programming specifically for video games, but it translates to any kind of programming.
Hmm.
And he's gotten hit twice now because we told all these kids go get programming degrees because that is the job people are hiring for. And now we have this huge bulge of computer programmers graduating, and there's just not enough jobs to sustain them. And
Yeah,
then you've got AI, which is doing a lot of that programming. And
yeah.
so where those people need to shift is there still needs to be a human checking the
Mhm.
code that the AI is writing. And so you become a code editor,
Yeah.
right? And so so there's all these kinds of shifts, and I'm not trying to put the fear of AI into people because I think like a lot of things, the extreme fear, some of the fear, a lot of the fear gets overblown and a lot of the hype, gets
Yeah.
overblown. And so we'll figure it out, but it will cause shifts and it will cause these issues. And so thinking from this debt perspective as creatives, um, just being aware that there's, the and the things that you can't anticipate.
Yeah, the externalities. So we started with the externality of tariffs affecting
Mhm.
farmers. AI is an example of an externality that could affect
Mhm.
writers, creatives,
Mhm.
coders, video game people. Anything that's external in the environment, you can't predict which way it's going to go, but you can prepare yourself to be more agile and you can watch your overhead
Mhm.
closely.
Yeah. Yeah. So and it can be, we're talking about broad society level
Yeah,
external, but to back to like a cancer diagnosis, it could be
yeah,
very personal, right?
yeah.
And it could be you, it could be a kid that, has its struggle or some other, all these different kinds of things.
So much.
And so I always incorporate that into my is this worth it,
Yeah, me
evaluation.
too.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not, I don't live with like an anxiety and fear about stuff, but I think it's just being smart.
Yeah, it would be silly if it wasn't part of our thinking because, even if something like COVID, that was an externality. It did affect if I had a conference booked, would I get my money back? So So read the guarantees, read the fine print. If you are going to spend on something,
Mhm.
we've got to be, uh, I think, diligent. I read the Apple podcasting fine print. Man, that took a year of my life. It felt like. But it was good because then I could opt out of the stuff that we didn't want to give Apple, like,
Right.
you know, which but you just have to read it in order to do that. And that, yeah, it takes time, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
Anything else you can think of about creatives and debt?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think my big message is avoid it as much as you possibly can, but also see it as a very important resource that, in the right instances, are really going to help you out.
Yeah. And okay, my other thing is if debt doesn't work for you, call it overhead. Because
Yeah.
seriously, because
Yeah.
I don't go into debt to pay any of my bills. I never owe any money to anybody. The biggest debt I have is to myself. I borrowed money off my personal bank account to pay into my
Mhm.
work bank account so I could continue to run the business,
Mhm.
and pay my draw. So, that is debt, but it's debt within a system, a closed system.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did go into debt earlier, and I will continue to once in a while pay for something I don't have the cash for because I think
Mhm.
it's worth it. But I'm definitely gonna do due diligence before I do that.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of great opportunities to expand what we do and grow capacity and income, and all these different kinds of things. And debt can be viewed as one tool to make that possible.
Yeah.
And but it's like anything, you got to be wise and cautious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how you do your business. It wouldn't work for me just because it would change certain tax things and other things that I have to think about.
Mhm.
But I love that you've put, I always admire your business sense. You
Oh,
have
thank you.
far more business sense than I do. Absolutely. And far more business sense than I think a lot of people who do what we do. I mean, I think we all are pretty cagey, crafty type, right? Because you have to be to get to succeed at this and survive.
Yeah.
But I think you've brought a real business sense to how you do your work that yeah, it's really cool. It's pretty impressive.
Thanks,
So
JB. Yeah, I'm not just down a dark alley with my Macintosh open and some. By that, I don't mean my computer. I mean my raincoat. Um, uh,
yeah,
yeah,
and your Deer Slayer cap.
yeah.
Uh,
Want to buy a story? Want to buy a story? Want to buy a pen? Want to buy an edit? No, I'm not doing that. But the other part of that is too. I did own a business in a different
yeah,
industry. So
yeah,
that any other creative businesses are unusual in that there is no training really for them. You have to go out and find it. Nobody comes up to you the first day you're planning to do your job and says, oh, by the way, you should keep everything separate.
yeah, yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Hope you have a great creative week.